In December 1872, a ship was found sailing alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No one at the wheel, no one on deck. The food was still on the table, the cargo was untouched, the captain's logbook was open, and every single person on board, 10 people, had simply vanished. No bodies, no blood, no signs of a fight, just gone. Nobody has ever explained what happened, and the theories, some of them will make you question everything. The ship was called the Mary Celeste, and to this day it is the most famous ghost ship mystery in all of history. Not because the story is old, but because no matter how many people have investigated it, scientists, historians, maritime experts, no one has been able to give a definitive answer for what happened to those 10 people. We are going to go through this story from the very beginning. Who was on that ship? What was found when it was discovered? What the investigators said at the time? And then we're going to go through every single theory, the ones that make sense and the ones that sound absolutely insane. By the end of this, you're going to have your own opinion, and I can almost guarantee it will be different from what you think right now. Let's set the scene first, because that's important. It's 1872. Ships are the main way to move goods across the ocean. There's no GPS, no radio, no way to contact anyone once you're out at sea. You're completely alone out there. Just water in every direction for weeks. The Mary Celeste was a brigantine, a 2-masted sailing ship built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, Canada. It had a rough history before any of this happened. It changed owners multiple times. It was involved in a few minor accidents. Some sailors who had worked on it before said the ship had bad luck. In fact, some of them refused to sail on it again. Whether or not that means anything, it's interesting to know. In October 1872, the ship was loaded up with 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, the kind used to make products, not to drink, and was set to sail from New York City to Genoa, Italy. Simple cargo run. Nothing special about it on paper. The captain was a man named Benjamin Briggs. He was 37 years old. He was experienced. He had been sailing for years. He was known as a careful, serious, religious man. Not someone who made reckless decisions. People who knew him said he was exactly the kind of captain you'd want on your ship. He brought his wife, Sarah, with him on this trip, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. He had a crew of 7 men, all of them experienced sailors. Some of them had sailed with Briggs before. These were not amateurs. This was not a chaotic, disorganized trip. This was a well-prepared voyage with a skilled crew and a captain who knew what he was doing. The Mary Celeste left New York on November 7th, 1872. That was the last time anyone saw any of them alive. Now, a month later, December 4th, 1872, a British ship called the Dei Gratia was sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar between Spain and Morocco. The captain was a man named David Morehouse. He actually knew Benjamin Briggs personally. They had had dinner together just days before the Mary Celeste left New York. One of the crew members spotted something strange in the distance, a ship sailing slowly in an unusual way. The sails weren't right. The movement was off. It looked like there was no one controlling it. Morehouse watched it for a while. Then he sent 3 men over in a small boat to check on it. Those 3 men climbed aboard the Mary Celeste, and what they found has been talked about ever since. The ship was intact. There was no major damage, no fire, no flooding serious enough to sink it. The cargo, all 1,701 barrels, was still there. The crew's personal belongings were still there. Clothes, boots, pipes, razors, everything still in the cabins. The ship's papers were missing, except for the captain's logbook. The last entry in that logbook was from November 25th, 9 days before the ship was found. It gave a location near the Azores Islands, off the coast of Portugal. And in the captain's cabin, this is the detail that people always remember, there was food on the table. A meal that had been partially prepared. A cup of tea that was still sitting there, as if someone had just stood up for a second and was about to come back. But no one ever came back. The ship's only lifeboat was gone. That's the one piece of physical evidence that tells us something definitely happened. These people didn't just disappear into thin air. They got into the lifeboat at some point and left. But why? And where did they go? The lifeboat was never found. No bodies were ever found. The Dei Gratia crew sailed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, where a formal investigation began. And that's where things got complicated. The man in charge of the investigation was a lawyer named Frederick Solly Flood, and from the very beginning, he was convinced that something criminal had happened. He thought the crew of the Dei Gratia, the ship that found the Mary Celeste, had somehow been involved. Maybe they had killed everyone on the Mary Celeste to collect the salvage money for bringing the ship in. That theory never held up. There was no evidence for it, but it shows you the kind of chaos that surrounded this case from day one. The investigation concluded without any clear answers. No charges were ever filed. No one was ever arrested. The Mary Celeste was eventually repaired and put back into service. It changed hands many more times. In 1885, it was deliberately wrecked in Haiti as part of an insurance fraud scheme by one of its later owners. So the ship itself ended up destroyed, just not in the way anyone expected. But the mystery of what happened to those 10 people never went away. Over the past 150 years, dozens of theories have been put forward. Some of them are rational, some are creative, and at least one of them is genuinely creepy. Let me go through the main ones. Theory 1. The alcohol fumes. This is probably the most widely accepted explanation among serious researchers today. Here's how it works. The cargo was industrial alcohol. 1,701 barrels of it. Alcohol, especially in large quantities, produces fumes, and some of those barrels were made from red oak wood, which is slightly more porous than other types of wood, meaning they could leak small amounts of fumes without showing visible damage on the outside. If fumes built up enough in the cargo hold, and then someone opened a hatch or brought a flame too close, it could have caused a sudden explosion. Not a big fire, just a strong, terrifying burst of pressure and heat, enough to send everyone on deck into a panic, thinking the whole ship was about to explode. In fact, when the ship was examined, some of the barrels were later found to be empty. 9 of them. The others were full. This could mean those 9 were the leaking ones. A researcher named Andrea Seller actually did an experiment in 2006 to test this. He built a model version of the Mary Celeste's cargo hold and used butane gas to recreate the conditions. He created an explosion that caused pressure and heat, but left no burns, no fire marks, no visible damage, which matches exactly what was found on the real ship. So here's what might have happened. The captain smelled or felt something wrong. He ordered everyone off the ship, into the lifeboat, to wait and see if the ship exploded or caught fire. They tied the lifeboat to the ship with a rope. But then, maybe the wind picked up, maybe the rope broke, maybe something went wrong. The lifeboat got separated from the ship, and 10 people in a small open boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in winter had no chance. This is the theory that makes the most sense physically. But it still requires us to accept that Briggs, a careful, experienced captain, would have made the call to abandon a fully functional ship based on fumes alone. Some people find that hard to believe. Theory 2. A waterspout. A waterspout is basically a tornado over water. It doesn't have to be huge or extremely violent to be terrifying on a ship. If one hit near or on the Mary Celeste, it could have caused enough panic for the crew to abandon ship, thinking it was going to sink. Some researchers point to the fact that the ship was found with its sails in a specific configuration that suggests something unexpected happened suddenly, not a gradual decision to leave. The problem with this theory is that waterspouts typically pass quickly, and a calm, rational captain might be expected to wait it out rather than jump into a lifeboat. But panic in an emergency doesn't always follow logic. Theory 3. Seaquake. This one is interesting. A seaquake is an underwater earthquake. They can happen in the Atlantic, and when they do, Ships above them can feel intense vibration and shaking, strong enough that the crew might think the ship is breaking apart. Some researchers have pointed out that the area where the Mary Celeste was last known to be, near the Azores, does sit in a seismically active zone. A seaquake could explain why the crew suddenly decided to get off the ship, even though the ship itself was perfectly fine. Again, the flaw here is, why didn't they go back when they saw the ship was okay? Unless the rope broke immediately and they couldn't. Theory 4. Piracy. Simple. Someone killed everyone, took the lifeboat, and disappeared. No bodies because they threw them overboard. The issue with this theory is that nothing valuable was taken. The cargo was left behind. The crew's personal belongings were left behind. Pirates don't usually do that, and there were no signs of violence anywhere on the ship. Flood, the investigator at Gibraltar, did find what he thought might be a blood stain on one of the swords on board, but later analysis showed it wasn't blood. It was rust. Piracy doesn't fit the evidence. Theory 5. Mutiny. The crew turned on the captain, killed him and his family, and escaped. But again, why was the cargo untouched? Where did they go? Mutineers usually had a plan, and no one matching the description of the crew ever showed up anywhere claiming to have been on the Mary Celeste. Theory 6. Sea monster. Look, I have to include this because people have suggested it. A giant squid, a sea creature big enough to pull people off the deck. This was the 1800s. Stories of sea monsters were common. Sailors believed in them. There is zero physical evidence for this. None. But it is a theory that exists, so there it is. Theory 7. Time slip or paranormal event. Some people, and yes, this has been written about seriously, believe that the Mary Celeste passed through some kind of supernatural zone. The Bermuda Triangle is sometimes brought up, except the ship wasn't anywhere near the Bermuda Triangle when it disappeared. So this theory requires moving geography, which is a problem. Here is what I think is the most haunting part of this whole story, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Benjamin Briggs was a careful man. He kept a detailed logbook. The last entry was November 25th, at 8 in the morning. The ship was found on December 4th. That's 9 days of silence. For 9 days, something was happening on that ship that no one recorded. Or if they did record it, those records were taken when the crew left. Think about that. For 9 days, 10 people, including a 2-year-old child, were on that ship, and then they weren't. And in all of that time, in all of those hours, not one physical trace of what actually happened was left behind in a way that gave us a clear answer. The Mary Celeste traveled approximately 700 miles in those 9 days without anyone steering it. 700 miles. On its own. Sails up, moving through the Atlantic, completely empty. That image, a ship sailing itself across the ocean with no one on board, while somewhere in that same ocean, 10 people were presumably fighting to survive in a small lifeboat, is one of the most striking things I've ever come across in any mystery story, real or fictional. And the child. Sophia Briggs, 2 years old. She never gets mentioned much. She's a footnote in most retellings. But she was on that lifeboat too, if the fumes theory is correct. A 2-year-old in an open wooden boat in the North Atlantic in December. Nobody knows what happened to her. Nobody ever found her. So where does that leave us? The most likely explanation, based on the physical evidence, is the alcohol fumes theory. It explains why the crew left suddenly. It explains why the ship was undamaged. It explains why the cargo was untouched. And it matches the experimental evidence that was done in 2006. But it doesn't fully explain why the crew didn't get back on the ship. It doesn't explain where the lifeboat went. And it doesn't explain why no bodies, no wreckage, nothing connected to those 10 people was ever found. The Mary Celeste mystery has been open for over 150 years. It has been investigated by maritime courts, historians, scientists, and journalists. It has been the subject of books, documentaries, and films. Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes, wrote a fictional short story about it in 1884, and that story was so well written that many people thought it was a factual account. It helped turn the Mary Celeste into a legend. But legends have a way of burying the actual people inside them. Benjamin Briggs was a real man. Sarah Briggs was a real woman. Sophia was a real little girl. The 7 crew members had names, had families, had lives. And one day in late November 1872, something happened to them out on the ocean, and the world never heard from them again. That's not a legend. That's a tragedy. And the fact that we still don't know, after all this time, with all the tools we have now, is a reminder that the ocean keeps its secrets better than anything else on Earth. If this kind of story is what you're here for, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.